we interrupt your regularly scheduled brainwashing in order to bring you news. Breaking news. A special segment of the almost daily Zcast, focused on curious, quirky, and quixotic news items that you may have missed during the last 48-hour news cycle. Hosted by me, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo.
Music from the good old days. Hello and namaste. Welcome, dear friends and listeners. It is Tuesday, August 11th. My back is giving me shit. And I've been a slow, grumpy monster all day, trying to get at the various things. You know, life in postmodern dystopia. But I had the good fortune to catch the moment live because I usually turn on the news while I eat. I don't indulge, I don't think, knock on wood, too much in the obsessive-compulsive watching of news all day long just to see what I catch. Although I do try to give myself a day or two here and there to purposefully do that, especially on random days when I'm feeling lucky. Other times, it just happens, bing, and I know that I don't have to watch the news pretty much for the rest of the day. In terms of things on TV. Because barring something breaking, epic, you know, the news is what it is, and there's all kinds of arguments about it. And reality is what it is, but I meet reality on reality's terms. I use the tools that are at my disposal. And trust me, when I suddenly magically become a really well-funded media empire mogul, and I can just travel to where I want to travel and tell you stories about the things and the people I want to tell you stories about because I got the money and the booking agents to book the people, I do what I do, which is pretend to do that, kind of. Openly. I'm not bullshitting you. I don't lie to you about anything. Have I ever pretended to travel anywhere? No. Some Instagram people apparently have done that for reasons I will never understand. But I digress. Today, as I was sort of like dither-dathering about what to do creatively, I'm trying to put a little more structure into my delirious day-to-day grind. And I'm trying to make sure that I knock out one podcast episode a day. But I give myself the right to like wave off a day or two. Because honestly, who the fuck wants to listen to this idiot that many times a week? You, perhaps? Who knows? We'll see what the numbers tell us at the end of the month. But I am trying to tinker with it so that it's something that is meaningful. And what the news, the fun, interesting, exciting news, for those of you who may or may not be up to the minute, this will be like household name, probably already is. You probably already know what I'm about to tell you, because I've wasted so much time dither-dathering. But on the Democratic side of the political theater of human puppets, no offense to anybody, we're all puppets, right? I'm a very inclusive puppet theorist, if I can coin a term. But put a pin in that. If you don't understand what that means, don't worry. We'll get into that in past episodes and in future episodes, because I spiral in and out. But the news broke some news to me just a hot minute ago that the Biden campaign, for what it's worth, all arguments aside, let's not worry about that for a hot second, has selected the junior senator, former lawyer, and rising star in politics from California, Kamala Harris, as the vice president nominee for the left. And I say huzzah, because rightly so, in a worst case scenario, what could he have done? I mean, obviously, worst case scenario, the Biden campaign could have talked themselves into, using the royal we, talked themselves into nominating an old white dude and trying to figure out a way to get away with it. And bless their hearts, they didn't. For whatever it's worth. And no, I cast no aspersions. I voice my opinion about things I disagree on or I don't like about people in the public sphere because that's what the game is. And we all, let me posit this, dear friends and listeners, we all may or may not be familiar with the universal age-old adage that we've got to take the splinter out of our own eye before we help our brothers or sisters with the beam in theirs, right? We all have a beam in our eye. Dig it up for your own enjoyment. Go research that. And think about the lesson, which seems to have been completely lost on everyone. Like, the other golden oldie is, ye who is without sin, cast the first stone. When we used to literally solve our problems by throwing rocks at each other. We've come a long way, humanity. And today, to come full circle and focus on where attention really needs to be, we have hit one of those beautiful, the cynics would say orchestrated, but whatever, whatevs. I'm trying to thread down the middle, right? Like, a historic moment in the Enlightenment movement. One could imagine a future historical revisionist take on it, of nominating women into positions of power. Now, as I have previously very unpopularly voiced an agreement on both sides, right? Like, yes to that progress, and also, as a person, not a man, is it really a great achievement to become inculcated into the very system of oppression that we're constantly fretting and frawing about, and that some people think it's a great idea to threaten to get into a civil war over? But that's a whole meta argument, so let's not get distracted by that. The system is operating as the system is operating, and we will take the ground where we can have it, and in general terms, looking from a broader picture perspective for myself personally, right? Because I am neither a leftist nor a rightist. Can we heal the political ideology in this world and maybe start working towards some sort of transcendent mode of thinking about civic organization? Please and thank you. Also, I have long heralded as a human being submissive to this idea. Like, I've given myself to this idea. I believe if I have beliefs, this is one of them. I also sort of feel like it's truly happening, but that there will be an ascension, a rise in divine feminine power, both literally, figuratively, metaphorically, magically, mystically, in all the ways. In all the LYs you can, juxtapose. Put a pin in that and stick with me, because that idea gets crazier. But we're not here to talk about that today. I was before that news broke, if I may share with you, dear friends and listeners, before that news broke, I was getting ready to do a short and snappy episode today. Also, congratulations for Kamala Harris. All political arguments aside, and all whatever horrible things the Trump administration is going to say about her, and all the critiques that I lay at politics and participating in politics aside, because I do, right? And that's a continuum from my perspective. That's sort of like, it's a slippery slope of greed and ego. And all who go tread there must tread carefully. And no human endeavor is a monolith. That's central. You gotta start there, or else all you do is just devolve into fighting over ideologues and their ideology. and I'm not interested in that so much. So congratulations to Kamala Harris. If I were the type of person bestowed with the civic public trust of being looked toward for endorsements, sure, I would give her my I'm not a leftist, I'm not a rightist endorsement as the left end of the spectrum's choice for vice president she'll pick. If she is worth her salt, I think that's not a horrible thing to say, right? Is that some terrible piece of language I'm supposed to have canceled already? Sorry, cancel culture. I'm so preemptive. I didn't subscribe to your thing to begin with. So all acknowledgments and thumbs up appropriately ascribed to the first black woman nominee to the position of vice presidency, which is interesting. I was beginning to say if she's worth her salt, 11-11, ding, I just missed it. She will bring to the vice presidency a kind of strength that we haven't seen in that room, wherever it is they sit all day. I don't know. Like, everyone knows what the Oval Office looks like. VP's office. Do you have every movie and show has shown just like a different range of humble little blank room to like broom closet, right? So, but what does it really look like? I don't know. Is it a duplicate of the Oval Office? If I ever became ruler of the world, I would make that so. I'd be like, we're revamping this shit so that their office looks just like the Oval Office, and they spend all day dealing with shit just like I do. But I digress. I don't have aspirations towards positions of power. No, thank you. My role is entirely other. But, no less, I do believe that people are here to play roles, both in civic life. Whether we're doing that right or not is a huge debate. But there is and should and could and probably always will be a form, no matter what we do to ourselves, beyond total annihilation. There will have to be, by necessity, which is the mother of all invention, a form of public discourse and civic activity that is one way or another tantamount to that which we point to with the word politics. I digress. I was getting ready to do an episode about the two weirdest things I'd heard in the news in the last couple of days. And share with you a bit, because it's got nothing to do with nothing, and it's my show, I can do what I please. Share with you a bit of writing I thought I had never written, but I know I wrote this. I'm not stealing things from people, I swear. But I digress. I thought I'd misplaced it. And I might be developing it into, like, a chapter or a part of a conversation, etc. But, so, in the news, very recently, if we may pivot away from Trump-topian electoral politics, because we'll come back to that in a, I'm sure to drop very soon, episode of the ongoing series that this is. Did I cover this with the news breaking news cover, or did I put this with the political countdown cover? Oh, I did a hybrid. Never mind. So, pivoting away from American Trump-topian politics, I'm sure you're all aware of the severely tragic event in Lebanon. If nothing else, quite nerve-wracking. It's quite alarming to see such devastating destruction caught on cell phone footage, and instantly available everywhere. Now, what I wanted to reference about it, let's take a moment real quick to just make sure we don't steamroll past the fact that there was great tragedy there, right? Like, I think 200 people died, or was it 200 people got hurt? But no, several thousand people got hurt and 200 people died. And and it was just one of those things, like, things were shitty enough, right, for everybody, not to speak ill of the dead or of those suffering through this new level of torment. But things were not super hot in that country, and the public discourse there, not knowing for sure, right? I'm speculating here, but I must imagine was already leaning towards, like, what do we do about this madness that we call our government? And what's curious and fascinating, and I think worth just taking note of and pinning to a corkboard figuratively in our imaginations, not literally, is this secondary phenomena that happens and sometimes is really easy not to notice, other times is, like, kind of painfully so obvious it's laughable, and other times it's perfectly right down the middle. And I'm worried about this. So, a moment to honor those who suffered, and those who continue to suffer in Lebanon. Namaste, friends. Thank you for joining me in that. As minimalist and as maybe, I don't know, I hope I'm not accused of being tone deaf here, but my concern, beyond the humanitarian concern and anguish and grief that I'm already feeling, and that I don't want to make too big of a thing saying that, but, like, obviously my heart goes out to everyone there, and they've been in my prayers, should that mean much of anything to anybody. But I can't help but notice, as an observer of the juxtaposition of our world as we see it through the different lenses that we look through it at, that in the social media realm, and I don't actually have an example in front of me, but in the social media realm, there have from day one speculations from a chorus of random people predisposed to this kind of thinking and the development of this sort of stuff, and the eventual manifestation of conspiracy theory content. And it varies from, there were drones to there was a long-range missile of some kind, to, in its extreme, although I don't know if it's attached to any of the different various deployment theories, but the one extreme iteration, because this is a multi-pronged swarm of content, right? In one of its most extreme iterations, the insistence that that was a nuclear strike. Now, I don't know from... I'm not an authority in anything, but like everybody else, I have an opinion. And based on what I saw, given that was one of those days that from the moment I turned on the TV, I was like, well, I just need to absorb this and process it and see how it's being presented in the different channels and see if anything new develops, because you never know. None of the cell phone footage, as I watched it, given my general knowledge, which includes, by the way, this is a fumble on my part. I typically have an inclination and a preference, and pardon for the prolonged sidebars here. I have an affinity or a habit of wanting to honor the anniversary of the very first use of tactical nuclear devices in war, not so much as oh wow, aren't I proud that my warring tribe nuked some people? No, but rather as one of the darkest days in human history, as a thing we did to ourselves and the planet. And I don't just think of it contained within the context of two moments or two incidences of great tragedy during that war. I also take into account it's the biohazardous amount of testing that built up to it, and also was spawned by it as the arms race escalated to nuclear annihilation levels of development. That's a real thing in human history, and people have various opinions on it, etc., etc. I could be wrong, but based on my rational comprehension of where tactical nuclear devices are and how they function, and like I said, I'm not pretending to be an authority, but the footage that I saw, most of which was captured by real-life individuals out there in vantage points at the location of the locale, as it was happening in real time. The curiosity of such large-scale phenomena is that there will always now and forever, and probably increasingly so, be accompanying publicly shared cell phone footage. And in none of the footage, while watching it in the hour of the breaking of the news, did I ever go, that looks like a nuclear bomb, by golly. It just didn't. It didn't hit me. That it looked like a chemical fire, and it looked like a really big, but it looks like what they're describing it as. Sorry. Now, some will say that that's a result of my brainwashing. And as a stab in the face on social media, I probably won't waste the time defending myself. But I don't think that it is. I think that whatever is being distracted from or by, I don't think it's got much to do with, the use of nuclear weapons. By the way, for those who are not aware, and this is the fun fact that keeps me, and I totally fumbled the ball. I didn't do a special posting on social media platforms. I didn't make the kind of episode I could have, should have, would have thought ahead of time and done a little bit of legwork on, and really maybe put some talking points together and structured it, give it some music, some sound effects, that kind of thing. The kind of thing I've been claiming I want to bootstrap myself into. I just didn't, because I tend to almost always sort of forget about when it comes around, and then it catches me by surprise in the middle of summer. And this year is the 75th anniversary of the tactical use of nuclear warheads in war over 2 different cities in Japan. And the frightening reality that comes out of that, for those of you who may not be aware, and I swear to you, you can verify this for yourself. This isn't some obscure conspiracy theory that I've just fished out of the sewer. It's not. I'm not trying to drain that swamp. This is something that, to the best of my understanding, is real and kind of just gross in and of itself, is that from then, because of the development of nuclear technology in that format, we proceeded to test like crazy. And as a collection of nation states, we, the human species, have, I do believe, detonated some almost 3,000 some odd various nuclear devices for the purposes of testing. But we've done it in a really insidiously disgusting way. up in the atmosphere, theoretically safe, but still gross. It's just as gross as all the shit we pump out with all the, fossil fuel industry. Call the whole thing, any combustion engine, call that all the fossil fuel industry complex. But I digress. We detonated test nuclear devices for testing purposes, for the purposes of testing, in the ionosphere, in various places in the atmosphere, out in, over the ocean, under the ocean, in the ocean, and in various locations underground. Now, none of this is like super hard to find information. There's actually a really kind of trippy, mind-blowing video that someone made chronicling as a time lapse over, like a radar map of the world, all the places and all the detonations throughout the testing history. So that's awesome. And I simultaneously, usually for the doom and gloom of it, pardon my tone today, love to bring up that Fukushima is still leaking nuclear material out into the ocean for, I've lost track of how many years that's been going on. Is it about to hit, is it already in double digits? Is it in its teens? Is Fukushima turned into a rebel teenager? Because that's frightening. It's like we're trying to make Godzilla happen, people, and we maybe, just maybe, we should stop. Is that a horrible reference? All of that, all combined? I digress. Coming back to the reason I'm talking to you today, it alarms me that this obviously doctored content with giant obvious missiles or other such types of things and attempts to conspiracy theoryify this event, and the tragedy being felt by how much longer before the hoax culture, it never happened, it was all green screened, nobody died, people come along, because the pattern is getting obvious. Now, whatever preliminary events led up to the massive and kind of fascinatingly, powerful explosion. And for those who are not aware, and no judgments, if you don't know that this has just happened in the last week or so, this is one of those infamous "according to a statements that I plucked from social media. That is someone else introducing an article from a pretty mainstream news source. So the news deniers, the news hoaxers, the anti-newsers are gonna, blow it off. But here's what I think. This is a factual thing. I think the Lebanon's prime minister actually did make the statement. But according to this statement, he made a statement to that effect. And I'll just read it instead of spiraling out of control. Quote, Lebanon's Prime Minister Hassan Diab said that 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate, a highly explosive material used in fertilizers and in bombs, had been stored for 6 years at a port warehouse without safety measures, and, quote, endangering the safety of citizens. Okay. That's obviously the given reason. And there's plenty of logical statements out there and arguments out there floating around for why one should never trust the main explanation given, ranging from all kinds of crazy theories to ones that kind of make sense. Sometimes, though, as I do believe Freud points out, a cigar is just a cigar. And sometimes a cigar is just an exploding cigar. And there's nothing more to it. Somebody bought you an exploding cigar. or somehow is that still a thing? Maybe it isn't. It's a visual sight gag from the era of the silent movie, ancient ye olde times. It is my totally unexpert opinion that the simplest explanation is the most believable. That amount of tonnage would create that kind of explosion. And here's my argument, my logical argument for why, just on the face of it, it isn't a nuclear explosion. I think a nuclear explosion of the kinds of sizes that we have now would have inherently caused shit ton more damage. And despite whatever ways that, the damage pattern that exists now is being spun by those callous and insensitive individuals more preoccupied with the conspiracy theory than the human suffering. No judgments there, folks, but it's your own. You're making your own disclaimer if you're fixating. And I think I'm trying to take a balanced approach. People are suffering, right? The whole world is suffering for all the reasons, everywhere, all the time, every day. We've got to manage what we are focusing on in order to have reasonable discussions. So the ones with missiles suddenly in still imagery, but not in any of the footage, I think that that's probably psyop, yo. I think that as much as it is just sort of the party line right now, it kind of does make dumb sense. Now, the real mystery is, why did that material get offloaded there and left, and why did it get neglected for 7 years? And quite frankly, as I like to point out here in my own home country, like, incompetence and greed explain away so much of most everything that you don't really ultimately need much of a mysterious, shadowy, hidden figures in the background doing dumb things. Now, am I naive enough to go too far in one extreme, too far in the other? I hope not. And so are you, dear friends. Now, if we're all totally wrong, and it turns out, like in one movie, we are actually robots and we just are playing out a massive hallucination that we programmed ourselves to have because we were existentially freaked out about being robots. Hey, that would be a weird reality to wake up to. Careful which ones you vote for. So, I just wanted to put that out there because I thought it was interestingly weird. Oh, there's a second part to this, and not to drag this out. But curiously, within a week, there were posts, and I, being the lazy fuck that I am, the total has been categorically unemployed right now, tragically. Thank you, COVID. Artists that I am, starving artists that I literally am becoming, have not looked into it. But I give it 60-40 odds to be sort of partially accurate. There's memes going around that the same day of the incident in Lebanon, there were strange, bizarre, large, very dangerous explosions in like 8 or 9 or 11 other countries. If I see that continue to trend, I'll poke at it and like go dig it up. But I thought it was interesting and weird. There was, curiously, not on the same day, but several days later, an openly called, quote-unquote, mysterious explosion here in the United States. Right off the top of my head, it escapes me what locality, but I think that within the first, 10 hours of it happening, it was clarified to have been a gas leak caused explosion that was shocking and surprising and very, very tragically damaging. Call me crazy, but if you neglect your infrastructure because your government is greedy as a country, dumb shit like this will happen to you without anybody trying to mastermind it. And I think that's just self-evident. Infrastructure is something that should be at the forefront of civic activity and not ideologically driven political fantasy fighting about nonsense and name calling and muckraking, in my humble opinion. And I hope that if politics is currently caught up in a trend of pendulum swing, extreme litmus testing, as I have posited throughout, parse that sentence for yourself for a hot minute, then one could imagine a scenario in which the Biden-Harris campaign knocks it out of the park because the grassroots doubles down in their own, flexing of organizing magic, which is sort of like the real part of politics when we do that, when we do it right. I think, right? If there is a valid point, all things not being monolithic, so a thing can't be 100% evil or 100% wrong or 100% corrupt. There must be good parts. They're going to push the pendulum. If you join me on this theoretical, I'm not making predictions here, right? I'm 60-40. I think it can go either way. I'm almost 50-50. That either side could, through intelligent effort or brute force or sheer law of attraction, raw humanistic tribalism manifesting, bring enough people into the process. And that's why I've always argued, wouldn't it be more interesting and possibly more productive if we just rallied all the non-voters, but coordinated so we got a massive new majority? Well, that's a whole other thing I've already talked about. And I spiraled way out of control. Bringing it back to Lebanon real quick, so that I don't sound like a complete idiot. Here's my final thought on that. Like all things Trumptopia, this is going to be a wedge issue of multiple conspiracy theory content brewing and fomenting animosity between people who disagree about what happened, especially in faraway places, distant from the plain and simple human energy and human act reality, like factual reality of the suffering caused by whatever it was, right? And that's where we have to be wary, in my humble opinion. In a similar, to move on to another item and then wrap things up for this particular episode, in a similar but slightly different thing, I am fascinated by the fact that this isn't getting more noised. Although we did just have that moment of, okay, hold on, let me reset for a hot second. I wish I had a cute short track to play of goofy music, but I'm having technical problems, and I need to reset and repopulate my file sourcing for in-betweener music to play for you folks for future episodes. But take a breath with me. In other news, not SpaceX just sort of got the spotlight for being the first manned flight of this radically new space delivery and automation platform, if you think about it, because it's like designed to fly itself, and you can throw some people in there and fly it. Quietly in the background, although I'm sure it's getting plenty of positive attention on social media and whatnot, but I didn't see any mention of it. And maybe it's because it's like crazy out of date. Maybe this thing is all postponed. I don't know. No, this is relatively new. I don't think, like, I went to the website. Anyway, I'm fascinated by the fact that this other charismatically led mega corporation is positioning itself quite realistically, not plausibly, not believably, but matter of factually, for low Earth orbit tourism. If you didn't think we were living that close to the bleeding edge of the future, head on over to virgingalactic.com and check them out. I'm sure there's a percentage of people predisposed to already say that 100% of the content being provided there is CGI and totally fake and being regulated by NASA, and that no normal people will ever be able to take a luxury flight into low Earth orbit. But that extreme of opinion set aside, it is entirely believable. I myself am categorically opposed to the flat Earth theory. I hate to disappoint. I don't know how many flat Earthers I've got in my audience that have been like, hadn't noticed that I'm... but then again, it's no judgment on you guys. It's because I see it as part of a paradoxical pair of ideological constructs of Mother Nature that are both inherently flawed, right? Flat Earth and globe Earth are categorically flawed enough to be, in my humble opinion, both be ruled out as inaccurate, because both categorically ignore that she's a living being, which she is, and not just a collection of inanimate objects with a thin film of life on top of it. So, digressing. I am inclined to tell you guys to share my controversial opinion that in 2020 we might literally be seeing the fulfillment of the Jetsonian like vision of some future in low Earth orbit, or the beginnings of some common use of that kind of experience. Maybe it'll turn into a thrill ride like phenomena, right? The real thing instead of the Disney version in a room with special effects and films and sound effects and all that. I don't know. I tend not to prognosticate, right? I tend not to stray over that line. But I will say this, dear friends. Presuming that Virgin Galactic doesn't collapse under the pressure of the economic wibbly wobblies of the corona, and succeeds in continuing to sell, which, by the way, you can now register. This is not a paid... I'm talking about this because I think it's real, and I think it's noteworthy, and I think it's worth thinking about. So, this is not a paid endorsement. I just did note that the first thing they hit you with when you land on the website is how you can subscribe to get notifications and you can already put money down on your future ticket, the reservation of your future ticket. If I had the disposable income and they were to announce like this, I don't know. I'm of two minds, right? Space, it's real. It's not fake. NASA's not bullshitting. Some of the things that we get some of the media that we see about space and the theories around it are indeed totally CGI. But math is the language of nature, and we use math to describe nature and to measure it. And therefore, I don't think they are inherently necessarily fabricated whole cloth lies, right? And what I was going to say earlier, and what I'm going to say now, is that if there's one project that will put an end to that discussion, I think, instead of being, I will not know until I ride myself, and I wouldn't be the first, but after like 10 years, if I'm still kicking, well, maybe I give it less than 10 years, but after X many years and no, like, oh no, horrible incidents, I might sign up for that. Of course, by then it'll be blasé and no one will care, right? It'll be all over it. But this is the thing that'll do it. Disposable income, affordable to a growing number of people. In other words, first adopters will be the investors that will bring the ticket price down to get a vast plurality of people, the once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to ride a beautiful trajectory around low Earth orbit for X amount of time and see the cosmic beauty that is this glowing womb suspended in the velvety darkness of the surrounding cosmos. Will we finally see an end to the debate, or will there rage on some hardcore base of believers and progenitors of variations into how extensive the cover-up is going through? I mean, even in the face of you, sir, who believe the world is flat, can buy a ticket yourself and go and look with your own eyeballs. Tell me that was a Disney ride. Don't tell me that was not the actual thing. I think that there's a certain amount of directness, right? That no simulator can simulate when it comes to within, and I know that there's levels of irony in what I'm saying, because I'm a hippie new age woo-woo nutjob mystic that believes this is all a hologram. A matrix, as it were, which some people argue is a simulation. Now, put a pin in that. I've already talked about it, and we'll talk about it again. I just look forward. This is one of those things of like, I saw that, and I was like, wow, how is that not more earth-shattering news? I guess because the first tourist flight has not gone. They've been in testing, and then they've been in social distancing and sort of suspended animation since the worst of the pandemic has hit. But save that space, as they like to say in the industry. That's something to come back to. And if there's some magical manifesting, wall art that I'm making for myself, in terms of not too distant future plans, like if my show were suddenly to get picked up, as it were, discovered and funded, and I would want to send a personally chosen representative to go on the first available tourist flight. And I would severely weigh the temptation of wanting to go myself for the first, sometime in the first year or whatever, but also probably maybe talk myself into never going. But I have a weird, complex sort of love-hate. I don't fear very much, but this would probably drive me a little batty relationship with the very idea of becoming a space-faring society. In large part because of a lifelong love of the science and the science fiction. But I digress. I've rambled on for quite some time today. Thanks, as always, dear friends, for tuning in It is a humble and a delight and a real honor and a pleasure that you tune in to listen to my wild and assorted opinions about the world and what's going on. And I welcome you, of course, to give your feedback, to share the show with your friends on your social media, or am I not supposed to ask for that? It's a show, it's a thing, it's content. You know what to do. Push all the buttons. Pay forward some love and some peace and some healing, because that's a thing you can do too, and there's nothing in my EULA against advocating for that. Remember, we are all creators, friends. No matter how you slice it, that is one of the things that is there to be revealed to yourself. And I shall leave you with a bit of music that I remixed myself using other people's noises, which I think I'm allowed to play on my own podcast, right? I think that's why I paid for it. Yay, commerce. Defund. Oh, everyone's arguing about defund the police, and I'm going to do an episode about that, I think, perhaps, if I haven't already talked at length about it. I may have. But we should defund economics. What? Imagine a world where defund economics was real and we just started living life and making all the things sustainably